In this next part, we're going to talk about problem solving and complexity, and moving on from that simple cause and effect solution to transforming the way that we see problems. Sengi, he wrote The Fifth Discipline, The Art and Practice of a Learning Organisation, and is well regarded. Sengi uses the iceberg metaphor to describe a surface approach to problem solving. We know that if the proverbial tip of the iceberg is 20% of what's under the surface of the whole lump of ice, and he suggests that if we just stay on the surface, relying on the predictability elements, we merely just keep applying the same solution to the problems that arise, and then the same problems will just keep coming, and we'll just keep solving them the same way, and that's the problem fix loop. And in complexity, that's not suitable. But if we go deeper, develop a more lasting, successful, and a sustainable response to change. So instead, Sengi suggests that we look for patterns, design systems, and then transform our mental models. First, we notice patterns. If we think about what the teacher wrote in that article, it's impossible to plan. So there's a pattern. We can no longer plan. Things are changing at a fast-paced rate. So we either keep doing it that way or we change our approach. Then we design systems. Design, I believe, is at the heart of complexity. It helps us to look at a problem with fresh eyes. And when we transform our mental model, this is where we decide to change our thinking, and perhaps that decade-long lesson plan is no longer fit for purpose. We need a new way to approach problems of practice. So we're going to focus on adapting to change, and innovation is dependent on how we transform these mental models. So let's take a look at a real-life problem of practice. How do we accommodate COVID-safe exams for Year 12? So students in New South Wales and Victoria in particular are back at school. And for those states, we're still navigating COVID in the community. We're getting vaccinated to decent high levels now. And for me, travel, or in New South Wales, travel has opened up beyond our suburb and even beyond our shore, but I still can't go to Queensland or Western Australia or Tasmania, I think. Schools want to be safe places in the community, and there are many complex problems we face now in designing and operating schools that weren't on the radar in 2019. And this is a problem we've faced recently as our lockdown in term 3 was just getting closer and closer to the HSC in New South Wales. So here's a complex problem, and maybe this is the answer. So if we only see the problem in terms of social distance and ventilation, this might be the solution, but perhaps there's a little more at stake. Henry Mencken, one of the influential writers of the 20th century, wrote, "For every complex problem, there's an answer that is clear." No, he didn't write that actually. He wrote, "For every complex problem, there's an answer that is clear, simple, and wrong." When we have complex problems, we have to tackle them with a commensurate solution. So let's turn our attention to the types of problems we are facing and the solution that these problems need. It seemed that the teachers in the earlier article were being challenged to look beyond what they'd been doing, and fresh eyes were needed. To do this, we need to engage in problem surfacing and solution testing, no longer guessing, but progressing. So what kinds of problems are there? The kind of a knowledge framework is a way of exploring problems we face and ways to tackle them. This particular article here is from Harvard Business Review, and you can easily find it and read a little bit more about it. But basically the word kind of is a Welsh word that considers multiple factors in our environment and our experience that influences us in ways we can never quite understand. So the kind of a knowledge framework identifies 4 domains of problem solving: simple, complicated, complex, and chaotic. And I like to explain them this way. A simple problem is a little bit like following a recipe. I'm talking about a simple recipe here. I'm not talking about those desserts on MasterChef, but so these ones are where we know confidence in the solution that exists. We know we can repeat patterns, cause and effect relationships are at play, and if we stick to the facts, we'll get the right results. This problem-solving strategy relies on agreement and confidence. We can reach a solution, and simple problems still exist. The next one is a complicated problem, which is repairing a watch or a clock. This is my dad. By family tradition, he was a watchmaker. It was his hobby. He was an engineer by day, but in the afternoons and evenings, he would set to work on repairing clocks and watches of the friends and our neighbours. He was a 3rd generation watchmaker. And in these evenings, he would sit at his bench and he would turn on that lamp and he would wedge that eyeglass into his eye and he'd pick up these minute tools and set to work. On the workbench were all the components required. There were wheels of various sizes, mainsprings, balance springs, dials, hands, and these tiny jewels that were necessary to maintain the balance of the mechanism. But as intricate and as detailed as this mechanism of the timepiece is, a watch can be fixed by disassembling, identifying a problem, repairing or replacing a part, and putting it back together again. It can work like new. It requires the right knowledge and expertise that a watchmaker has. This is a mechanical process. It's logical, B follows A, and a watch can be reduced to its component parts and put back together again. But humans aren't like that. We are so much more complex. Imagine if we tried to fix human problems like my father would fix a watch. Just take it apart, put them back together again. But that doesn't mean throughout history this hasn't been tried. So what does a complicated problem look like? We know a solution exists and we know an expert diagnosis is necessary. Cause and effect relationships are at play. If we stick to the process, we can get to the results. We may not know, I may not know, but I know somebody who does. The problem-solving strategy here is agreement and confidence, in accessible expertise. Now, if we turn to the COVID exam problem, this is when we rely on the ventilation technician to get the air quality levels right. The next one is the chaotic problem. Does anyone remember playing Pin the Tail on the Donkey? I think it could be the most purposeless game I have ever engaged in. You have a tail. You have a tail here, and you have a picture of a donkey, and all you have to do is get the pin with the tail on the rump of the donkey. But you're blindfolded and you're spun around. Your senses and your orientation are disrupted, and all you can do is feel away in the dark and hope for the best. This is not a pleasant experience. It's characterized by high turbulence. Nobody knows who knows anything. Too many decisions to make. We are tripping over the unknown, and predominantly we are just guessing. As a problem-solving strategy, this is uncertainty that's mired in discord. I don't know about you, but I've had this sense of guessing over the last few years. It's not critical because we're navigating waters we've never been in before. We feel like we've been just tripping over unknowns. And it's not great for our well-being to remain there for too long. So the next one we're looking at is complex problems. And I equate complex problems to raising children. It's a complex activity, raising children. We have 2 grown sons, and they've turned out to be quite nice humans. But you know, when you're in the middle of child rearing, you feel like you're just making it up every step of the way. We start up with a vague idea of where we want to end up. Create these conditions for reasonably well-rounded adults to develop. We have some experience, maybe if family members had children or friends or neighbours. We have some skills and we're willing to learn. And there are usually helpful people in our world with expertise. But ultimately, there isn't a surefire path. There isn't a manual. And it feels like we're taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But hopefully, we get there in the end. So imagine if we had that step-by-step manual for raising a child, like fixing a watch or repairing or following a recipe. And what was in that manual was all we ever did, and it produced the desired results. Now, I think that's been tried down through the ages as well, and it didn't really end well. Now we accept that it's complex. We're hopeful of getting there. We don't have the answers, but look for emergent patterns. We tap into experts. We apply creative and innovative thinking and strategies, and we don't always know what we're doing. The problem-solving strategy here is uncertainty with optimism. We are optimistic. There's this internal sense that actually we're going to get there in the end. Often we attempt to dwell in the realm of the complicated, when in fact, we're operating in the realm of the complex. And complicated ways of working are not suited to complex conditions. So let's return to that problem. How do we accommodate COVID-safe exams for year 12? Well, if we think of it as being outside and applying a ventilation, we're only seeing this from simple or complicated perspective. When there's multiple mitigating variables, there's rain, hail, heat wave, the exam's 2 hours, can't put the kids in the sun. So how do we tackle this problem? There are government obligations, health and safety requirements, school culture, parent expectation. But most importantly, we put the needs of the learner front and centre to understand the impact on their perspective of the world. I'm suggesting that tackling complex problems requires a multi-pronged attack. Problem solving in complexity needs to be a team activity. There needs to be sufficient time that's commensurate with its importance, and that the work of problem solving is seen as a design project, not just a decision or a directive from on high. In the next section, we're going to look at these a little deeper, but in the meantime, I'm curious to know, what are some of the complex problems you're facing in the shared work of education and design?